Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the premiere episode of the Stylus League interview with Creative Giants. We are very, very happy to kick off our very first episode with the amazing Raphael Phillips, aka Jehudi San, aka Imhotep. If you know, like I know, you're going to be very excited after this is over as well. I've been a fan of Raphael's work for a number of years. Actually, I kind of caught up with him on Instagram and saw his stuff, and we talked back and forth and everything. And just a really nice guy and an amazing artist. And so, as always, I'm joined by my partner Bradley. So, Bradley, you want to chime in?
Oh, what's up, Mike? This
Hey,
is like
brother.
amazing that we have this opportunity to interview Raphael Phillips. Um, you know, Mike took the time to educate me on people that I should be aware of, and
Mhm.
I am thoroughly pleased to welcome Raphael to the Stylus League. What's up,
Sure.
Raphael?
How's it going,
Hey,
guys?
man, how you
Happy to be here.
doing?
This is all the kind words. I feel very, very lucky to be regarded so highly. It feels
Hey,
weird.
man, we call balls and strikes here, brother.
Okay.
we
Wait. We do what again? What do we do again? Balls and
call we
strikes?
call we call balls and strikes. Yeah, we call them like we see them.
Yeah, cool.
It's
Okay,
a,
cool. All right, we
it's no
call it.
yeah. We're not hyping it up. It is what it is. You're gonna see. Folks will see a little later. So
So,
anyway,
Ralph, Raphael, so one question, I'm just like curious, how long have you been in the industry? Like, how did you land to where you are today?
I've been in the industry since March 22nd, 2005. I don't know why I know that specific date. I mean, it was my first job was at Rockstar Games, so
Oh,
it was like
cool.
my first time from like I grew up on the East Coast, but like moving from Georgia to California was like a big deal. So it's kind of like one of those things that really sticks out. But yeah, got my first gig at Rockstar, and so what did that make it? Are we 2005? Is that 18 years? Yeah.
yeah,
Dang, that's a
Wow.
yeah.
long time.
That's a
That's a
minute.
long
Yeah.
time. You,
Yeah.
soon,
So,
very soon, your career will be old enough to go into clubs.
Or the military. Yeah, yeah. So let me just ask you. I mean, anybody that knows that that gets into the field that they want to get into knows how difficult it is to
yeah.
break into the industry. How how do you go and get Rockstar as your first job, dude? Like that's major.
I was just that good. No, just
Yeah, I like that.
out.
I like that.
I mean, I was good at modeling. At the time, there was like at SCAD, there was a 3D track, but it wasn't like specific. Like it wasn't like it is now, where there's like a game track or a VFX track or all these other tracks. So it was just like a very broad 3D track. And I found out that I was good at modeling early on. Like it was just this is pre ZBrush. Like this is like when you
So, you,
make organic models in Maya
and you
and
made a box, and you were moving the
cutting.
vertices.
It was like box modeling was hard, but like I was good at it. And that was like, I was drawing my entire life, but like somehow that modeling just like called out to me to the point where I kind of got a reputation for it at SCAD. And a friend of mine who had been using like Lightwave in high school, he passed up a job at Rockstar. He's like a technical wizard. Like this guy he's a genius. He passed up the job at Rockstar and said that I should be the one to take it. And I got it because of somebody that I knew. I mean, like a lot of things, like
Yeah.
it's really about the people that you know. So I was lucky to know somebody who recommended me for the job that they didn't want. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's dope, man. I mean, the fact that yeah, sure. Did you know somebody that got you in there is whatever. Like you got in there, showed what you could do, and managed to stay at one of the top tier gaming companies, that's out. What are some of the games you worked on?
My first game there, and probably one of my biggest achievements in terms of just like completing something, was Rockstar Presents Table Tennis. And on that game, I pretty much touched all of the characters, and I was fresh out of school and I had something to prove, so I was just like really on it.
Yeah.
And then I went over to Red Dead Redemption, and I worked on that for about a year and almost 2 years, and then left. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I like both of those games, and in fact, table tennis was dope. That was a fun game, man.
it was more fun than it should have been. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember, so there was a colleague of mine. He started on the same day that I did, and we were both sitting on the couch, and HR was there, and we were both sitting on the couch waiting to see what we were assigned, and we knew that there's two games. There was table tennis, and then there was Red Dead. And my buddy got Red Dead, and I was like, man. And he was just like, that's right. Da, 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 da. But
Yeah.
I got a game out, before he. So
Nice.
that was like a year and a half worth of work, and then like Red Dead didn't come out until like 4 years later. So
Mhm. So you had enough time to finish your game and then get on his game and do
Yeah.
some work.
yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
Nice.
what's cool about that is like you are like a Swiss Army knife. Like you have experience with game pipeline, you have experience with VFX pipeline, and you have experience with digital printing. Like that's like I think it's a triple threat. Like that's a triple threat, right? Yeah, I think
I
so.
got
Yeah,
one
yeah, yes.
concept art.
Concept.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
This.
That whatever the four thing version of a hat trick is. That's that.
This
Yeah.
this man been blessed with everything.
Amen.
I mean, it's really just built up from. It's all kind of the same. Like it was kind of luck of the draw that like I was in games as they were kind of ramping up to be as powerful as visual effects. If I was like in the early stage of games, it was not. I could not have crossed.
Yeah.
It. And then it's just like with ZBrush, I mean, you're sculpting anyway, and I just happened to be at a place where like the technology to print things was there. So it was really just like, obviously there is time spent in the seat on the box developing the skill, but I mean, it was luck of where I was. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to. Yeah. I try to keep very like. I don't like to get a big head about anything, and it's like because there's really just like you are influenced by the times that you're around.
Yeah.
There's
so. Oh, go ahead. I mean to cut you off. Keep going.
Oh no, it's just like that's just kind of how I view it. It's just like there is a such thing as free will, but like when you look at the forces that you're around, almost not. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you're you're just like a little leaf in the stream of like life. And so, what is free will when the highway is like as big as the earth? You know what I mean? It's just
yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a great way to look at things, man. Like I love your attitude. I know this is the reason why I love the industry so much is that there are a lot of like super talented artists and creatives that have that type of attitude. Unfortunately, there are some that do not. And what I noticed, like I could tell just by looking at your work, and please believe I'm on IG every day, and I manage to kind of see whatever you post up and try to give it a like all the time because I'm more more times than I can even admit. I've been like, oh damn, this is crazy, and then I'm like, oh yeah, of course it's you. So, but all that being said, your stuff looks like it's always evolving, and constantly, like your 10,000 hours have passed, and you're continuing to kind of learn and put things out there. Just so folks know, Raphael told Bradley and I something a little earlier that blew our hats off, and we're
We're
going to
gonna
bring
get
it
into
up
it. We're
a
gonna get
little
into it.
later.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll get into it later. However, just the work ethic is pretty amazing. So okay, so you were with Rockstar.
Mhm.
You worked on table tennis and Red Dead, and then what happened after that?
I left, and I was trying to find myself. So
Mhm.
funny enough, do you guys know Grasshopper Studio in Japan? They made like No More Heroes and
Yeah.
Killer 7. Yeah, so like
Yeah.
I found out that the owner of that studio really loved table tennis, and I was just like, well, let me get out of America. And so I applied for a job in Japan.
Mhm.
Um, the short of that is I got the job, didn't take it because they were paying like, it was at the time 30,000 a year to live in
Yeah.
Tokyo, and
Wow.
that's not enough money. Um,
Sure.
so I just kind of was like in the wilderness for a little bit. At the time I was in San Diego. This is probably 2008. I moved up to Los Angeles 2009. I just like quit. I was basically I started bartending at this like high end bar for a little bit because I actually had burned myself out at Rockstar. Um,
Okay.
I had a lot to prove. I didn't want to go back home to the East Coast, and I just worked too hard. And so I basically bartended at a really fancy bar in LA, and I wanted to prove to myself that I wanted to see if I still loved 3D, still loved the work, and I was
Yeah.
working every day. You know, I was making stuff every single day, and I was like, okay, let me jump back into this. So I just started finding some local game studios at the time, um, freelancing here and there, and then probably a couple years later, I started doing previs at the third floor. So
Okay.
it's like the career is long, but it feels short because I haven't really like the middle is like the lost years. You know what I mean? Like it's just like there was a lot of just like odd jobs just to pay the bills.
Yeah.
There was like nothing glamorous. It was just let me. All right, you want me to make that? Sure, got it. Like previs
Yeah.
is not hard. It paid, but it's not hard. It's in
Gotcha.
fact not really great for leveling up your skill. So
So now you mentioned being
Okay.
a transplant. How do you go from? I'm sorry, brother. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, yeah. So one thing, like, so I have experience in games, and I had some light experience, like with doing something in film. What do you think is important for? I consider myself a character artist, like whether it's going to be in a game or whether it's going to be in a film. I don't want to, even though I'm working for Bungie now, I don't want to be categorized as solely as a game artist. So what are some key things that you think a character artist would have to have that's translatable to both industries, right? Because the saying, like, you always got to tailor your portfolio to the type of job that you want.
Mhm.
But what if your job or your need is that you want to make characters regardless of the medium?
Well, that becomes difficult
Yeah.
because it depends on the type of games that you're making. Like, if you're making, you know, something with a lot of like stylized creatures, you're gonna have a hard time jumping into VFX because like oftentimes it's not stylized. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're trying to match live action. Now, if you're working on like I don't know Callisto Protocol, Uncharted, or where it's like hyper real,
Yeah. Hyper
then the
real.
translation is it's easier, but
Hmm.
it's just VFX timeline is shrunk. You know what I mean? Like I think the biggest thing that I noticed with games was like you have time. I mean, there's still like milestones and you're constantly working, but like your final deadline isn't until like years later.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about a turnaround time of weeks, and people know shortcuts. There's just you're trying to make something pretty in VFX while being fast and dirty. Like
Okay.
the camera can't rotate around the character. The camera is,
Right.
and that changes. Like just as an example, I mean, I remember on Twitter a couple weeks ago, like there was this whole UV debate, and like with games, just the hierarchy of games from like years ago to now, it's just like pack your UVs well. When I got to film, I saw trash UVs in them, and it's just like, oh, okay, but I can use like 20 UDIMs. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's like it's that mindset of going from clean to just like whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first thing, because it's just like you're shrinking your timeline. And so then it's just like the knowledge of Unreal to like, I don't know, V-Ray or Redshift, it doesn't necessarily line up one-to-one. And so that was one of the problems that I ran into. It's just like, oh, okay, I have to learn something else. And it's completely different. And it's not like my base is in games. And it's like, it took me a while to start to get my head around like rendering engines. So, yeah. So it's just like, it's I'd say, just to kind of wrap that up in a nice bow, it's just shrinking your expectation of time that you have to being like, I mean, weeks, or a week, or, I have a week to finish this because I have the character scan and I'm just going to like use the skin and just paste it on there and paint out all the shadows, and then use the shader to actually generate all the other details that I want.
Okay.
So it's a lot of shader creation.
Okay. Oh, wow. So you would say like experience like with Mare and really understanding like, how texture, like, is it the character? Of course, it's the character part, but understanding the texture creation and in the character design for films. Are you responsible for both sides, right? Are you doing the character and you're doing the look for the texturing part? Like, could you, like, is it best to be a Swiss Army knife of both? Or like, if you are a strong, fast character artist, focus on creating stuff like that?
It depends. It depends on where you're at. Got a chance to do some work at Blur, and with Blur, they typically, it was depending upon the character, it was modeling and texturing. But like sometimes you just do the model. You know what I mean? Like with games, you do the whole thing. But with VFX, it depends on what the staff is like. It depends on how many people there are. If it's a big studio, you probably won't do textures. You know what I mean? Like they will just be somebody else that does it. If it's a small studio, you might be doing everything. It really depends on the studio. But I think that's part of the thing. It's just like we're expected to, with games, you're expected to do the whole thing, and it's like the work doesn't begin until it's baked in the engine. But with VFX, it's just like, does it look good in the shot? Yeah. Okay, let's keep it moving. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's yeah. So it just depends on the size of the studio.
Has and I'm sorry, Mike. Last one. Has Substance, in your experience, has Substance started to break more into the VFX world now that they like increased their pipeline with multi UDIM processors? Is it still Mari that you've seen?
So when I was at Blur in 2017, and that's when I actually first got my hands on Substance. We were using Mari. I mean, Mari's powerful. I hate it, but it is powerful. Like, I mean, but I think Substance, there's just certain things that Substance does very, very well. And so you'll probably see both. Some VFX studios after that place, after Blur, it was all Substance, but it depends on, and then I actually freelanced for another big company. I don't know if I can say who it was. Sorry, I just realized that.
No, it's okay.
They were using all Mari because it was just like, okay, we need to take these 8K scans and we here's the skin, and we need to paint out all the highlights in the skin because the skin is like directly correlated to this scan, and that was all Mari. You know what I mean? So it really depends on the need, but like most times, studios will use both. So
and I put that out there because a lot of people, when they're getting into texture, Substance is one of the things that they like have easy access to. And I just want to make sure it's known, or it's important that time invested, because I think 9 times out of 10 most people who get into character art, they start with games,
Yeah.
and they learn this flow, this PBR flow and substance, but they may be interested in going into VFX just to know that time that they spent learning that tool, it's still valuable. It's not just for games.
Yeah. I mean, it's the more you know about shaders in general, whether it's in games, I think it's going to apply to VFX. It's just different. It's like the same, but it's different.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Gotcha.
And also, if anybody's that currently works in VFX and is like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, that also could be true because I haven't done VFX in a little bit and some things might have changed. So,
No one way to do it. So the thing that's great about kind of having Bradley and I together is that he is going to be kind of asking you questions from a pipeline and gaming industry type of a background. I am going to be coming at you more from, I think, an illustrator, concept artist. Kind of you're what I would consider a I don't know, professional specialist, generalist. Yes. Only because you do everything, right? So like, I know that I would get people coming to me and they're like, "Hey, listen, a good friend of ours, Danny Williams, Point Pusher, was like, hey, Danny. Mike, shout out to Danny." Was like, "Hey, Mike, it's not fair. You had a career as an illustrator and now you can sculpt too. That's not fair." Now I'm looking at you and I'm like, okay, so you illustrate very, very well. You sculpt very, very well. You can texture. You can do, rendering in a way that when we tell people how they do it, how you do it, they're going to be as angry as Bradley and I are. And get just like your bag of tricks is bananas. So before I get into the question of how did you reintroduce yourself to the industry, because you took your time off, you started off with a AAA game studio, then took a break to find yourself, and then you got back into it. But before I get into asking you A, how you did it, and B, when you broke back into the scene, who did you work with? I want to ask you, you said you were a transplant. So you started off on the East Coast. Shout out to it. You said Georgia. Were you in Atlanta?
I was in Savannah because I went to SCAD.
Savannah.
But I was born in upstate New York, raised in Baltimore for about 7 years. Then my mom got there and we moved to Roanoke, Virginia. So,
dude, you've been everywhere. So I am about 45 minutes south of Baltimore. So shout out to Be More, and the fact that you made it in and out of Baltimore without being shot. Big up to you, my friend. Listen,
that's really real.
Dude, my son was at Towson his first year, and he went from being in private school his whole life to Towson. And his first year was in close proximity to 4 shootings, dog.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's my mom, she specifically was like, I will not raise a black male child here because your chances will be narrowed each year that you spend here. So she moved to Virginia, which was like, it was a better move, but like just at the time, like Baltimore was wild. There's a lot, it's not, it gets a bad rap, but it's also wild.
Yeah. It's true. Both things are true. Baltimore is dope. Please believe I'll go to I'll go to the waterfront and have a fantastic time in Baltimore and chill and all that. However, there are parts of Baltimore that when you look at The Wire, they did not embellish any of that. That's real talk.
So I was born and raised in New Orleans, and I'm now in Florida. And once you see like water's not always brown, you mean there's colors to it. It changes colors. It's not just root beer.
So root beer. That's funny.
It's not just
Yeah.
root beer.
Oh my god.
So you've been all over the place, and then you moved out to LA on your or the West Coast on your own or with family.
On my own.
Wow, that's a big move, bro.
I mean, I didn't want to go home. Like my
Yeah.
my family life was a little without getting into it too much. It was just like it was rocky. So it was just like I think one of the things that actually helped my career was that some of my friends in school, they actually had like better homes to go back. So it's like okay,
Yeah.
you don't exactly land on your feet,
Sure.
then come back home. But I didn't necessarily have that. Like I had it, but it would not have been,
Yeah.
So I operated from the standpoint of like, I can't go back home.
Yeah.
And so like, I remember at SCAD, we had this thing where the idea was you had class from Monday to Thursday and a 3-day weekend with the idea that that's 3 days instead of 2 to work on your portfolio. But SCAD was like basically like a mini, like New Orleans, you know what I mean? It was just like they went hard at the waterfront from the time class was out Thursday until like they went hard. And I'd be in the computer labs on a Thursday and Friday by myself, mad, but like telling myself, like literally saying to myself in like a small mantra, I'm doing this for my future.
Right.
And turned out it worked. So leaving was not a problem because Savannah had some of that Baltimore in it, if you know what I mean. It was Savannah.
Yeah.
It's a big school, and it might have changed because I haven't been back in like years. But like Savannah, you can get shot. So
One thing I mentioned to Mike once, and I think it stays true. Like I look at Mike, I look at you, and on my own journey to get to where you guys are, the cost that you paid, I think like needs to be recognized and understood because you gave up things in order to be on your journey, like that extra time that you could have been like having fun doing this. You paid a toll, and you did like when people was popping bottles, you were like clicking buttons.
But I guess like is how bad do you want it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I remember hearing this parable about like, actually no, I'm sorry, it was Usagi Yojimbo, like the original manga. And, like, I'm forgetting the names because it's been years, but he went up to like the lion guy and was like, I want to learn the way of the sword like you. And the lion, his soon-to-be sensei was like standing near this puddle or this kind of like standing pool, and he dunked his head in the water, and then he pulled it up, and he was like, "What do you want?" I don't know. Dunked his head in the water again, pulled it up. He still didn't know. A third time, pulled it up, and he's like, "Air." And he's like, "Until you want these skills as bad as you want air, don't come to me." And
that was the last dragon, though.
I mean, but I think that might be a martial arts trope. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think of it in terms of that. But like, I know people who like. I guess I don't look at going from Georgia to California because I know people who like English is their second language. They came here because a good friend of mine. I don't want to bust him out, but like he came here from a different country because this was like he wanted to learn how to do this stuff. And this was the only place to do it. He was learning English he was already a good artist, but he was just like reintegrating himself into a different country. So I'm just like, I guess that's not to downplay like the weight of going from East Coast to West Coast, but it's just like, I don't know. The more people you meet, you kind of just that it's like,
it's true.
It's not so bad.
It's not bad. All it is just like, just sacrificing time playing video games, like people have sacrificed more, you know what I mean? Like people with kids.
This is true.
Like I didn't have kids, so let me work.
You're a humble dude, man. Like, so it's true. What Bradley's saying is true also. Like it's one of those things where you do have to want it. Like you obviously want it and you wanted it then. And it paid off, right? It paid off in dividends. And so for me, I kind of started off making t-shirts.
Mhm.
So, it's very funny that I went from what's considered the low end of the like the art spectrum. People kind of downplay t-shirts and everything.
Mhm.
But went from doing that to kind of getting a foothold into doing illustration for magazines and things, and we share kind of a common, and Bradley does too, a common love for hip hop, and that was my foot in the door, was painting artists for magazines. So to see your journey, I always like to compare and kind of contrast to what I did and the way that Bradley's doing it. Bradley started off at a Fortune 500 company. Like, dude has only just gotten into doing what he loves,
Mhm.
which is the creative side, and starts off by working at Bungie. So what I'm saying, like, it's
Yeah.
one of those things where you now, again, sacrifices. You know what I mean? Like, to step away from a 6-figure job to the unknown
Mhm.
is a hell of a sacrifice too. So like you didn't take the easy route either, Bradley.
Shout out, baby. Shout out, baby. Thank you for making that money. Shout out.
yeah,
Thank you for making that
and
money.
and yeah, again, we were just talking about this the other night. So let's get back on to now. You're in, you're on the West Coast.
Mhm.
You took some time. You were bartending and doing art for yourself. And I'm assuming building your portfolio. So is what type of work were you doing when you were doing that? That's not the Woo Troopers or any of that stuff, right?
No, I mean, let's see. I probably jumped back 2010,
Okay.
and I mean, basically from 2010 to like 2016, I consider the lost years, because I was doing a lot of personal work, some of the stuff that I've never shown, but like, I mean, yeah, I worked at a failed startup as a lead and a senior character artist, because
Mhm.
like that's both roles were needed. That failed. That work is on my portfolio, but it's like, it didn't really land me anywhere. I did a
Sure.
bunch of like uh, what is it called? Previs stuff that's just like, in terms of like what we do, garbage, because it's previs is just, it's super low.
Placeholder.
Yeah, like I
And
was doing a lot of nothing. I was still doing personal work, but like I was
mhm.
just kind of doing a lot of nothing, and I felt like I was like dying on the vine. That's probably why I'm still hungry. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that time where a lot of people kind of blow up and establish themselves in the industry, I was just like, I was lost because I didn't know what I wanted. Like I realized I had a conceptual mind, but when you're doing VFX work, you don't exercise that. You know what I mean? You're not, like, I'll give you an example. I remember I was at Blur, and this is no shade to any of my Blurians, because they're some of the most talented character artists out there. I mean, hands down. But just kind of speaking to what I'm talking about is like, I remembered Spider-Verse trailer came out, and that blew my mind. I mean, like the rest of the world, it was like, oh,
Sure.
that was a line in the sand where things are changing from this point.
Right.
I just
Yeah.
remember like looking at his shoes, and I was like, characters with cool shoes, man. Like it's more than, to me, it's more than just a cultural thing. It is
Yeah.
like the clothes make the man, make the woman.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It
Mhm.
symbolizes like who that character is, more than just like, the typical like scar across the eye, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember saying that in the chat, and people were laughing, and they didn't get it. And I was like, oh, it's cultural, but it's also conceptual. And it's just
Yep.
like VFX, you are, or with the title of character artist. And this is, again, no shade to any character. It's just like with the one title of character artist, you're sometimes you get the ability to influence the design, but sometimes, most times you're just like, just make what the concept artist made. And I think
Yeah.
for me, from my very first job, the thing that always was my kind of silver bullet was my personal work. And the personal work got me more jobs than my professional work. And that has been consistently the thing through to this day. And so I just realized around that time that my mind was the superpower, not the actual art. And I considered that 2010 to 2016 the lost years because I was trying to figure that out. And until I figured that out, nothing felt right. And I just felt like I was just doing all this work that just kind of didn't matter. It's like a lot of my portfolio. I feel like I have a small portfolio because it's really my reintroduction to the world was like 2017. Like it started at Blur. Blur was like, and then from Blur, I worked on my first Marvel film, the first two actually, which was Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther. And then from there, it just kept on like going up. But I almost no lie, I almost quit. Like those last years were lost. Like it was a weird time. So
that's a great place for a segue. So like I wanna kind of dive into that, right? Because I think as artists, we all have times where we have self-doubt. The good ones anyway, right? There's some people who just walk through life thinking they're the mess, you know what I mean? But they don't grow. But for the people who kind of sacrifice for their craft, it's very easy to get in your own head and really doubt yourself. And you see other people who may not, they may not be putting out the caliber of work that you're putting out, but they're getting far more opportunities and praise and, this, that, and the other. And I know, we don't see what goes into that, right? Like we only see the thin slice of success. We don't see all of the hours that it took to get there or the sacrifices that were made. But some people, I mean, if I'm going to be real, there are folks out there who have blown up off of very little talent, right? Yeah. So seeing that is like a dagger into the heart of, anybody that's worth their soul.
I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, Mike. Forgive me.
Bradley is so overrated. This dude gets so much love from the industry. Yeah, and I hate him for it. He's younger and far more attractive, and it bothers me to my core.
Forgive me, my brother.
It's a problem. Anyway, see, Raphael. See, he can't let me have my minute to be introspective. He has to clown me. But
I felt that someone needed to apologize, and I thought you were talking to me. I thought you were talking to me.
So anyway, we'll edit all this out in post. Anyway, so tell me how, like, what's the low when you talk about you wanting to get out of the biz, when you know what you're capable of? Tell me what is, if you feel like sharing it, right? Like if it's too deep, then don't bother. But
I love getting into this stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
What was the low?
Yeah, like, and maybe there was more than one thing. You know what I mean?
Look, I got L's. As many, like, I feel like my W's are just now like I got.
Okay.
You're standing on the L's to get to the W's.
Look, I remember when it like the Art versus Artist 2022 when I posted it, I was like, don't let the internet fool you. Everybody's going through it, and like I meant that because like look, everybody. It's weird. We live in this era now where it's just like the highlight reel of Instagram or social media is like people are seeing, but like I guarantee you, everybody has some L's, man. And like my lows. It was probably 2015, that game company that I was at, the startup imploded. I felt like I was getting bitter because I remember they brought in a new lead character artist to replace me.
Okay.
And he was like wondering why I had this negative attitude at the time. And it wasn't, the attitude came from like, we kept on trying to hit this goal and the goal kept moving.
Yeah.
And when the head of the company moved the goal, he would blame, or it just circumstances would land on other people's shoulders. And I'm like watching people around me drop like flies while they have this overly ambitious goal, like stupidly ambitious goal. And I'm just like, guys, like, can we just focus on a small thing? And it's just, as the ambitions grew bigger and blame is getting cast on my workmates unfairly, and then they're getting fired, and I started getting an attitude because I'm like, this is nonsense. I'm not going to quit because I want my unemployment if this all goes, but like, nonsense. And I remember the lead character artist came in, older guy, and talented, super talented. He taught me some things. Like I he definitely taught me a different way of working. But watching him, I remember the day some crazy stuff popped off, and he came to me and looked at me with understanding. And all I said to him was like, I told you, man. I told you. And the company, like, people started furloughing, like people were on furlough, blah, blah, blah. But I think the low was, I hated being right about stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
and
it made me feel like I was negative all the time. It made me feel like I was, like I couldn't get out of this, like, shadow of terrible production. Like, production is hard, and I don't think people understand how hard a production is. Like, working on a game is hard, working on a movie is hard. You have so many different people in the kitchen, and when you experience failure enough in those arenas, it makes you feel like you're a failure. And I felt like I was a failure. I was like, I got skin in this game, I started out strong, and what am I doing now? You know what I mean? Like, I literally felt like I was just like, how was the best part of my career the first part? And even that was like rocky. And I was just like, am I ever going to get a chance to, like, I can do good work, but like, am I ever going to get a chance to prove it? And I felt like I couldn't prove it. And just stuff started turning around, but it was me doing, again, personal work, like the Notorious MODOK. That was based off of originally there's a guy, Adam Rosenlund, who I remember seeing this drawing of it on Facebook. But I I had this folder on my desktop where I'm like, these are things that I like that I'll make. I'll get to it one day. And I just started making it and started adding my 2 cents. And then like a good friend was just like, oh, you should 3D print that. And I think slowly as this thing came to life, people started recognizing the skill. And so that like was what pulled me out of it. But the lows were just like not getting to work on the stuff that I wanted to work on. You know what I mean? Like here, at least when I was still in games, like I was inspired by like Final Fantasy and like crazy characters, like all the summons and stuff like that. And like the best I could hope for was to work on, a AAA game that has a dude with a backpack. And it's no shade, you know what I mean? Like it's not, but it's because they're doing it at a very high level. Like in terms of the character exploration, that's not fun. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you this: how old were you at the time that all this was going through your head?
I just turned 41. I was 23 when I started in the industry, so I was early 30. Wait, no, this had to be like early 30s, early to mid 30s, and I felt like so. Then you also have like the time, like the time of your life. It's just like I'm 33, 34.
Right.
struggling.
Right.
Were my parents right about this art thing? You know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
like I'm looking at other people, they got, it's, and like, am I the problem? Like I like my BS detector because of other studios was very high. So I like just react to BS right away. And it's just like, I try to ignore it and push it away, but then the BS would like creep up and I'm like, oh, I'm right again. So it's just like, it was one of those things where it just kind of put me in this weird place of like trying to defeat negativity while also knowing that I was right about certain things, but also never being validated about those things that I was right about, and also approaching my mid-30s where I was just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I mean, if you would have told that person that it gets better, I would not have believed it. Because I was like, I thought the time for it to get better was past. Because now you're seeing like, there's monsters coming. Like there are some killers out there who will sculpt you under a table. Like there are killers, and they're young, and they're hungry.
Dude.
And I'm just like, am I food out here right now? Like, and it's, but I think that's when I started to realize, and a lot of other artists in general and talk about this, but it's like only you can make what's inside you. Nobody else can do that. Doesn't matter about anybody else's skill. Only you have a point of view that is your way of seeing the world, and nobody else can replicate it. And it's your responsibility, if not your calling, to do that, especially if you have the ability of artistic skill. I think in that way, I mean, this is the only time I'll get big-headed about stuff, but I think in that way, artists are better than people. Only in the sense that they're closer to like that creative source. You know what I mean? It's like when you view things from an aspect of creativity, I think you're able to see things in a lot more gray than a lot more black and white.
Right.
Because that like imagination is the key to everything. Like imagination to me is like, or lack of imagination is where you get like things like racism, because they can't imagine that somebody else that looks like us could be, you know what I mean? But that's lack of imagination. You know what I mean? Lack of imagination, I feel like, is the root to all the bad things. And we thrive in imagination. And that's why I think artists are like closer to like that creative source. So yeah.
That's an interesting point that you brought up too. Like, I mean, this is how dope the industry is. Like, we can literally look at amazing artists around us, and it's almost like Highlanders, right? Like we appreciate each other for our skills. You know what I'm saying? And we know that, hey, listen, I'm riding with Bradley right now, but when the day comes where he has to try to chop my head off, I got to be ready for that day. You know what I'm saying? So it's and I'm not mad at it. It's just what it is. He's told me several times that's going to happen. So anyway, it's all good. I'm trying to prepare him. I feel like Sean Connery. You know what I'm saying? Like every day, I'm trying to get him ready for the quickening. But it's interesting that as artists, we see each other's skills, and that's what we put forward, and that's
what we see first, right?
Yeah. Firstly, it's the skills. Second, it's what kind of an artist are you? Are you a person who is extremely talented and humble? Are you someone who maybe had a couple of fire pieces and has let that go to your head, and you can't grow beyond yourself and have no desire to? Or are you someone in between who is maybe really talented but lazy, right? Not hungry, doesn't really want to go get it, and so you're going to be relegated to mediocrity your whole life. You know what I'm saying? So, but we see that first, and then we, after we see the kind of person you are and everything, I think after all that, we're like, okay, is this person an asshole? Are they cool? and then after that, it's like, all right, what color is the dude? You know what I'm saying? Like, so this is the only industry I know of where like the color of your skin is like down at the bottom as far as we see each other.
Yeah.
That being said, now I tell you all that to tell you this.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we still have to do it twice as good and twice as fast to be even. But I say that just as a person who's 55 this year, been in the game a long time, and know that I've gotten a lot of really stellar opportunities, but I've worked for those opportunities. You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, I know that if I don't present myself a certain way and carry myself a certain way with the client, that they're
Perfect
more than
every
happy.
time.
Yes, right. Perfect every time. Flawless every time.
Every time.
If the movie poster that I slaved off of ends up going by the wayside because the producer's husband took a photograph of Tracy Morgan cat. Okay, let me not get too specific. But anyway, it happened, dog. It happened. But so I know that are and I said this in I said this in my Intel video, and it sounded mad heady when I said it, but it's true. Like, our station in life is very precarious. You know what I'm saying? Like, we could fall off at any second, and nobody cares. Not only because of what I mentioned earlier, but because, like you said, there are thousands of younger, faster, doper artists that are just like, it comes as like a second nature to them, like they're born into it somehow, right? Crazy talented. That's why I'm on ArtStation a lot less than I used to be, right? Like, I used to go on there to be like, all right, let me get out of my bubble, let me see what's going on, and then I would see pieces that would just like break my heart, and I'd be like, this is dope. And then I would look and see that the kid is like got pimples on his face, and I did this thing, and I'm gonna graduate from high school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, this kid's a problem. And there's hundreds, there's hundreds of him.
And they'll take the job cheaper
for nothing because they don't know any better. That's the thing. Like, we all know, right? Like, especially, and I want to get your perspective of this, obviously, but working with people and getting got over the years, in addition to having good jobs, but also being taken advantage of because we're artists. You know what I mean? We all kind of start off in that. Well, what do you think it's worth? What do you want to pay? And eventually it takes learning that this is a business like anything else, to take it seriously and realize your worth. But these kids who have raw talent, they don't know yet. So it makes life for the freelance artists that might be older and more mature, it makes it harder for us in those instances. But like, what are some of your experiences with that? Have you ever been beaten out by somebody who isn't necessarily suited for the job and felt a certain way about it?
I mean,
not so much training your replacement, because I know that's trash. And
yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's happened and I've not known.
Yeah.
But
and that's when it's a good business. A good business will make sure that you don't know.
That's right. That's right.
Then that's a liability.
I mean, actually, with the job that I was supposed to take in Japan, like years ago, I remember. So I flew myself out for the interview, and because we met at GDC, and I arranged that, and they agreed. And then it was a very cultural thing of like, well, if you ever happen to find yourself in Japan, when I was like, okay, I'll be out there April. So I flew myself out. And while I was at the studio, I overheard them talking about a programmer who they were like, oh yeah, no, we have this really great programmer from Canada, blah, 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 that's going to be coming around. And they weren't talking to me, but I heard it. And they were like, oh yeah, we're paying him a lot of money. And then they tell me they're only going to be willing to pay me $30,000 a year. And then, yeah, I mean, it's happened at a lot of companies. Some of people's favorite companies, Yeah, I get offered a job with an extremely insulting salary that somebody else took, but I didn't take. I mean, but like in terms of freelance now, I don't know that it happens too much, but primarily because I'm in this position now, and I've been very lucky. I'm doing like primarily sculpture and concept, and with the sculpture, people just reach out, and so I can negotiate that price with them. And with concept, there's a union, and like the concept artist, we talk about our rates because we want everybody to get paid,
Right.
a good rate. And so it's like if I make a certain rate on a job, I tell all my homies, this is the rate that we get per week.
Sure.
And they're like, cool. And then if they're bringing me onto a job, they'll tell me, hey, this is what rate we're making on this job. And that's the benefit of unions. And I think, unfortunately, there's no union for VFX or games. So if you're freelancing both of those, you're kind of just stuck to whatever, people get, whatever you think you can negotiate, but you don't know like what the pool is.
Yeah.
Got you.
So I mean, it's yeah, I've been beat out, but I think now I'm just in this position where I'm kind of fortunate because I don't necessarily have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Like it's up for me. It's up to me to turn down the job.
If you go, if you want to take the job or not.
Because like the concept rate, like what's weird about my career is that the hardest thing in terms of difficulty and hardness, games is number one. Absolutely. I mean, hands down. VFX number two, concept number three. But in terms of pay, concept number one, VFX number two, games number three.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it's just like I remember a company reached out to me, and they're doing something really cool, and like it's the way the whole thing went down. Like I turned them down, but I wrote a very passionate email, an email that should have been a call, and they took it a certain kind of way, and I was like, that's not the way I meant it. But I say all that to say, I told them how much money I was making per year at that time, and that was like primarily concept. And I watched 3 CEOs' face just do this. Because it's like it's not games is not the same. Like it's you are making more money on concept because you're not. It's freelance. I mean, there's no security, so that's why the number is so high. But for games, there is kind of security, and so the number will be definitely lower. But yeah, like it's unions.
Yeah,
games and VFX might need them, but that's a whole other.
No doubt.